Hi, I'm Henry Martin. There's something I need to share with you, something that changed my life forever. On September 14th, 2023, I died. For exactly 6 minutes and 43 seconds, my heart stopped. And what I saw and heard in those moments completely reshaped everything I believed. Before that day, I had it all: wealth, status, and power. I was a successful businessman in New York, living in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. Faith? That was for other people. I never thought I needed God. But after dying and meeting Jesus, everything changed. What I learned about the future of this world, about Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and the mark of the beast, will shake you to your core. That day started like any other. I woke up early, grabbed my phone, and checked my emails. Business was thriving. My company had just landed a massive contract. On the surface, life was perfect. I had a morning meeting with investors at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan. I remember getting dressed, strapping on my Rolex, and sliding into my Tesla. Traffic was heavy, but I wasn't worried. Deals like this were second nature to me. Then, as I was halfway across the George Washington Bridge, everything changed. One moment, I was driving, lost in thought about what I was going to say in the meeting. The next, the sharp sound of screeching brakes filled the air, followed by the sickening crunch of metal. There was no time to react. A semi-truck had suddenly swerved into my lane. I remember the impact, the glass shattering, my body being thrown forward. And then, silence. A wave of weakness washed over me. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and my fingers slipped from the steering wheel as the car spun out of control. Faint voices echoed in the distance, people shouting, but they faded as darkness swallowed me whole. Then, something strange happened. I was floating, above my body. I could see the wreckage below, my Tesla, crumpled beyond recognition. Paramedics rushed in, pulling me from the twisted metal. One of them shouted, "No pulse!" Another voice followed, "He's gone!" But I wasn't gone. I was right there, watching it all unfold from above. I should have been afraid, but instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of calm. I drifted higher, listening to the paramedics fight to bring me back. Every word they spoke was crystal clear. And then, I felt it. A pull. Something was calling me. In the distance, a light appeared. Not just any light. It was alive. The pull grew stronger. Even without a body, I could feel myself being drawn toward it. And then, a voice echoed in my mind. "Henry, come." I knew that voice. Somehow, deep down, I just knew who it was. And in that moment, everything changed. I didn't step toward the light. It pulled me in. It was as if every part of me, every cell of my being, or whatever I had become, was being drawn forward by an invisible force. But I wasn't afraid. In fact, I felt lighter than ever before. No pain, no stress, no worries. The noise of the world, the constant hum of life, was just gone. As I moved closer, I noticed something. Music. But not like anything I'd ever heard on Earth. It wasn't just instruments or voices. It was thousands of voices, singing in perfect harmony, weaving together in a way that filled me with warmth and peace. Then I realized I wasn't just floating. I was standing on something. Or maybe I was simply existing in a space that felt solid. I looked down. Beneath me was light. The sky above wasn't blue. It shimmered golden and alive, shifting like it had a heartbeat of its own. And then, I wasn't alone anymore. A figure appeared in front of me. Tall, strong, radiating light. "Henry," he said. I didn't need anyone to tell me who he was. It was Jesus. His eyes didn't just see me. They saw into me, into my soul. He knew everything. My thoughts, my mistakes, my regrets, my victories, every hidden part of me. And yet, there was no judgment in his gaze, only love. He reached out his hand. "Come with me." I took it, and in an instant, the world around us changed. The golden light was gone. We stood high above the earth, looking down at the world below. I could see cities, oceans, and mountains stretching beneath us. "I have something to show you," he said. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just stood there, watching as the scenes unfolded below. At first, everything looked normal, people going about their daily lives, working, living, surviving. Then, everything changed. Chaos erupted, protests filled the streets, governments crumbled, financial markets crashed, people cried out, desperate for answers. And that's when I saw him. As Jesus guided me through the vision, I noticed the light wasn't coming from a single source. It was all around us, pulsing with energy, almost alive. The music swelled, but it wasn't overwhelming. It was beautiful. Jesus took my hand and pointed toward the horizon. The scene shifted again. A man stood before a massive crowd. He was confident, charismatic, familiar. It was Elon Musk. He stood at a podium, unveiling a new technology. In his hand, he held a small microchip. The crowd erupted in cheers. People waved signs, chanting his name. "This chip will change everything," Elon declared. "It will protect your identity, give you direct access to financial systems, and even connect your mind to the global network." The people were ecstatic. They lined up eagerly to receive it. "Watch closely," Jesus said. "This is how it begins." Then I saw how the chip worked. People could pay for food and travel just by waving their hand. They could access information instantly, simply by thinking about it. It seemed harmless, even convenient. But then I saw the price they paid. Those who accepted the chip began to change. Their eyes lost their spark. Their smiles disappeared. They became distant, detached from everything around them. And worse, they stopped praying. They stopped believing. The chip wasn't just controlling their money, it was controlling their very souls. "The enemy won't come with threats," Jesus said. "He will come with solutions." He turned to me, sadness in his eyes. "Henry, you must warn them." I stood there in silence, struggling to process what I had just seen. "But why would they accept it?" I finally asked. "Because they will trust the wrong leaders," Jesus replied. "They will seek answers from men instead of from God, and the enemy knows this." Then I saw a figure in the distance. It was Donald Trump. He stood behind a podium, speaking with confidence, promising to bring peace and stability. People listened. They believed him. "Trump will rise to power again," Jesus said. "And at first, he will speak the truth. But even he will be deceived." I watched as Trump signed agreements, stood alongside the United Nations, and enforced policies aimed at bringing peace. At first, it seemed to work. But then, the mark appeared. "It will look like progress," Jesus warned. "It will feel like safety. But it's a trap." My heart sank. The crowds were cheering, but beneath it all, I could sense something dark. "You must warn them, Henry," Jesus said. "Tell them before it's too late." A surge of energy rushed through me, and suddenly, I was falling backward. The music faded, the light dimmed. Then, I opened my eyes. I was back in my broken body, lying in a hospital bed. But nothing would ever be the same again. After showing me Elon Musk and the rise of the microchip, Jesus stretched out his hand toward the horizon. In an instant, the entire scene shifted. It was like watching time speed up. Cities rose and fell. People changed. The world transformed right before my eyes. First, I saw the United States. But it was no longer the America I once knew. Chaos filled the streets, protests, riots, chaos everywhere. Cities were on fire, fear and desperation filled the air. People were hungry, angry, desperate for answers. The government was crumbling, unable to keep control. And then I saw him. A figure stepped forward, and the restless crowd immediately grew silent. It was Elon Musk, again. He stood on a massive stage, giant screens, behind him flashing bold words. His voice was steady, confident, echoing through the square. "We have the solution," he said. "The world has suffered long enough. It's time for order, for security. It's time to unite." The screens flickered, showing haunting images, empty shelves, homeless families, violence in the streets. Then he raised a small device. I recognized it instantly. The same chip I had seen before. "With this, life becomes simple," Elon continued. "No need for cash, no ID, your health records, your bank, your entire identity, secure, effortless, all in one place. No more fear, no more hunger." The crowd erupted. Cheers, tears of relief. But beside me, Jesus gripped my hand tighter. "Watch closely," he whispered. And suddenly the scene shifted. I saw lines forming, miles long, people waiting for the chip. Some hesitated, but once they saw how easy life became, more and more stepped forward. One by one, they accepted it. Stores no longer accepted cash or credit cards. You needed the chip to buy anything. Doctors wouldn't treat you unless you had the chip. Everything, transportation, jobs, even communication, was connected to it. Then, the scene shifted. I saw people who refused the chip being turned away from grocery stores. They weren't allowed into buildings. Eventually, they were arrested for not complying. "Do you see how easily it happens?" Jesus asked. Families were torn apart. Children begged their parents to get the chip because they were starving. Churches were divided. Some pastors calling it a gift from God, others warning it was the mark of the beast. The divide was deep. "Even my followers will be deceived," Jesus said, "because it won't look like a threat. It will look like a solution." My heart ached as I watched believers lose their faith, not because they were forced, but because they didn't see the trap. And Elon Musk? He was at the center of it all, not as a dictator, but as a savior. "This is only the beginning," Jesus said, "and they will accept it willingly." I watched in disbelief as the vision unfolded. Elon Musk was no longer just a businessman. He was the architect of this new system. What struck me the most was how effortlessly people trusted him. He was calm, composed, and rational, never threatening, but incredibly persuasive. "Why him?" I asked Jesus. "Because he holds the key to technology," Jesus answered. "The world trusts him because they put their faith in technology more than they do in me." The scene shifted again. I saw Elon in a high-level boardroom, surrounded by the most powerful leaders in the world. Nations that had once been bitter enemies were now working together. The US, Russia, China, even countries in the Middle East were aligning under a single economic system. Agreements were being signed. Hands were being shaken. "He will unite the nations," Jesus said, "not through war, but through technology." I watched as the microchip system spread. People could make purchases with just a wave of their hand. Medical treatments were fully automated. Diseases were disappearing. Hunger was declining. On the surface, it seemed like a perfect world. "But what's wrong with that?" I asked. "Because they no longer trust in me," Jesus replied. "Their faith is in Elon, in the system, in human wisdom." Then I saw something unsettling. Those who had taken the chip could no longer sense God's presence. Their prayers felt hollow, like echoes in an empty room. Their hearts grew cold. At first, it was barely noticeable, just a quiet numbness creeping in. They still went to church, they still talked about God, but it was all routine, empty. "The chip isn't just technology," Jesus said. "It's spiritual. It changes their ability to hear me. Then Elon made an announcement. A new phase was beginning: direct neural integration. The chip wouldn't just handle finances and identity anymore, it would connect directly to people's minds. Their thoughts could be monitored. Their behavior could be adjusted. And they'll accept it, Jesus said, because it makes life easier. I saw Elon standing on a platform. People knelt before him, not as a god, but as a leader, a savior. Then the scene darkened. It will start with convenience, Jesus warned, but it will end with control. The vision shifted again. Now I saw Donald Trump. He was older now, but still sharp, confident, and full of authority. Standing behind a podium at a massive rally, he faced a roaring crowd. Then, with a single raised hand, silence fell. "America will rise again," he declared. "We will reclaim our power. We will restore order. The chaos will end." Behind him stood world leaders, their expressions unreadable. Flags from many nations waved in the background. There was a sense of unity, of strength. But beneath it all, something felt off. A tension lingered in the air. "He will rise to power again," Jesus said, "but even he will be misled." Then I saw him sign an agreement, a global pact promising security and peace. Nations came together under one economic and political system. Religious leaders gave their blessing. The markets soared. People celebrated. "They will believe they have found peace," Jesus said, "but it will not last." Later, I saw him signing another order. This one made a digital chip mandatory for employment, banking, and healthcare. He framed it as essential for national security. Most accepted it without question, including many Christians. "He will think he's doing the right thing," Jesus said, "but he will be deceived." Then I saw him standing beside Elon Musk at a press conference. They shook hands, smiling, as the crowd erupted in applause. "The political and the technological will merge," Jesus said. "And then the trap will be set." Darkness fell. The world was no longer divided by nations, it had become one. A microchip now controlled everything. No one could work, travel, or even buy food without it. "This is the system," Jesus said. I saw those who refused the chip. At first, they were denied basic services. Then, they lost their jobs. Eventually, they were arrested. Families were torn apart. Desperate parents begged their children to comply, fearing they would starve. "Those who obey will be rewarded," Jesus said. "Those who resist will suffer." Churches stood empty. The same Christian leaders who once warned about the mark of the beast now encouraged people to accept it. "Even my own church will be divided," Jesus said. Then I saw people hiding underground, forming secret communities. They grew their own food, bartered among themselves. Angels moved among them, shielding them from harm. Though the world outside was engulfed in darkness, light surrounded these faithful ones. "I will provide for my people," Jesus said, "but they will endure great trials for their faith." Then I saw Elon and Trump standing together in a golden hall. Behind them stood powerful men in suits, and something else. Dark figures, not human. "They do not realize who truly controls them," Jesus said, "but you must warn my people before it's too late." The scene shifted again. I was no longer standing beside Jesus. Instead, I found myself in the middle of a busy city street. People moved all around me, going about their day. At first glance, they seemed normal, just like anyone else. But something was off. Their faces were blank, empty, no emotion, no awareness. They walked with a strange mechanical rhythm, as if they weren't really present. Then, I noticed something unusual about their hands. A faint glow pulsed beneath their skin, small lights embedded in the backs of their right hands. Some had the same eerie glow on their foreheads. A sense of dread tightened in my chest. I knew what I was looking at. "It's the mark," Jesus said. I turned to see him standing beside me again. His eyes held deep sorrow. He raised his hand toward the crowd, and in an instant, I saw beyond their physical appearance. I could see their souls, dark, empty, lifeless. "They have been marked," Jesus said softly, "and they don't even realize what they have lost." I watched as people entered stores, effortlessly paying with just a wave of their hand. With a simple touch, they unlocked doors. A young mother cradled her toddler. A small mark was visible on the child's tiny hand, too. But something was off. The child looked pale, empty, almost lifeless. "It's not just about technology," Jesus said gently. "The mark is a spiritual contract. By accepting it, they surrender their freedom to choose me." Then I noticed a man approaching a checkpoint. He extended his hand. A security officer scanned it. A small green light blinked on the back of his hand. And he was allowed to pass. Behind him, another man stepped forward. He lifted his hand. But there was no mark. The officer's expression turned cold. "You don't have the mark?" "No," the man answered, his voice unsteady. "Step aside," the officer ordered. Without warning, soldiers in dark uniforms seized the man. He cried out as they dragged him away. No one reacted. Not a single person in the crowd even glanced in his direction. "They've become numb," Jesus said. "The mark doesn't just alter the body, it hardens the heart." I saw people inside churches, their hands marked. The pastors stood at the pulpit speaking of unity, peace, and acceptance. "This is not a sin," one of them said, raising his marked hand. "God wants us to thrive. This technology is a blessing." The congregation nodded in agreement. Their eyes were distant, empty. I turned to Jesus. "Why are they embracing this?" I asked. "Because it makes life easier," he said. "They don't see the cost, not yet. By the time they realize, it will be too late." Outside, I saw a man standing in front of his home, praying with trembling hands. Inside, his children cried. Across the street, armed officers watched him closely. "They will take everything from those who refuse," Jesus said. "Their homes, their jobs, even their families." Then I saw the man being dragged away. His children screamed as soldiers pulled him down the street. A red symbol was painted on his door. "This won't happen all at once," Jesus continued. "It will be slow, so subtle that they won't notice, until they are already enslaved." The scene darkened. I saw people with the mark standing in neat rows waiting for orders. Their expressions were hollow, their will no longer their own. "Once they accept it," Jesus said, "there is no turning back." I whispered, "Why? Why can't they turn back?" Jesus looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "Because the mark isn't just technology," he said. "It's a spiritual bond, a covenant with darkness. Once they give their souls away, they can never take them back." A deep sorrow filled my heart as I watched the crowd move forward, their faces illuminated by the glow of a massive building ahead. "Tell them, Henry," Jesus urged. "Warn them, no matter the cost, they must not take it." The scene shifted. I found myself standing in a grand hall made of glass and steel. Rows of people were gathered, their eyes fixed on an enormous screen. On the screen, Elon Musk appeared, calm, smiling. "We are entering a new age of peace and prosperity," he announced. "This chip has eliminated hunger, disease, and fear. The world is finally united." The room erupted in applause. Cheers filled the air, hands clapped enthusiastically. But as I scanned the faces, I saw it, the emptiness in their eyes. "Watch closely," Jesus said. I noticed a young woman in the crowd. She was smiling, but as I looked deeper into her eyes, I saw fear. She turned to her friend. "Something doesn't feel right," she whispered. Her friend gave a reassuring smile. "Relax, this is progress." "But I don't feel anything anymore," the young woman said, her voice trembling. "I used to pray. I used to feel God's presence. But now, nothing." Her friend's smile faltered. "It's just an adjustment phase. Give it time." The young woman's expression darkened. I could see the emptiness growing inside her. Jesus' voice was heavy with sorrow. "They feel nothing because their connection to me has been severed." I saw people trying to pray. They clasped their hands and spoke the words. But nothing happened. Their hearts were closed off. "They've lost their ability to respond to me," Jesus said. "That's why they can't find their way back." I saw pastors preaching from their pulpits, but their words felt empty. The Holy Spirit was no longer there. The people in the pews sat silently, expressionless. "It's not that I stopped speaking to them," Jesus said. "They just can't hear me anymore." Then I saw families gathered around the dinner table. But no one was talking. They just sat there, staring at their hands. A faint glow pulsed beneath their skin. They were connected, yet completely disconnected. "They are no longer free," Jesus said. "What will happen to them?" I asked. "They will follow the system," he replied, "until the very end." The vision shifted. I saw the stock markets crashing. Massive red numbers flashed on giant screens. Banks were shutting their doors. People stood in long lines, desperately trying to withdraw their money. "It will begin with a collapse," Jesus said. Then a familiar face appeared on the screens, Elon Musk. Unlike everyone else, he was calm, the only voice of reason in the chaos. "We have a solution," he announced. "A new digital currency, no more inflation, no more crashes, stability at last." And now, the chip was the key to accessing the new system. Without it, people couldn't buy food, pay rent, or even travel. "They'll accept it," Jesus said, "because they won't have a choice." I saw businesses shutting down, families losing their homes, people sleeping in their cars. But those who took the chip, they were fine. They still had jobs. They could still buy food. "Compliance will be rewarded," Jesus warned, "but refusing will bring suffering." I watched as those who rejected the chip were evicted. Hospitals turned them away. No help, no mercy. "Tell them," Jesus said, "they need to prepare, now." Then the scene changed. I saw Christians gathering in secret, hiding in basements, fields, and small homes. They whispered prayers and read from hidden Bibles, lit only by candlelight. "They will be hunted," Jesus said. Soldiers went door to door. People were dragged from their homes. Anyone without the chip was arrested, imprisoned, or worse. "They'll be called extremists," Jesus said, "a threat to society." Even families turned on each other. Children begged their parents to take the chip, just so they could eat. "Even loved ones will betray each other," Jesus said. But then I saw miracles. Food appeared where there was none. Angels stood guard over believers, shielding them in their darkest moments. "I will provide for them," Jesus said, "just as I provided for Elijah in the wilderness." Then his voice grew stronger. "But they must prepare now before it's too late." The vision shifted again. This time I saw a small village nestled among rolling hills and lush trees. The homes were simple, built from wood and stone with gardens scattered throughout. Everywhere I looked, people were working with their hands, planting crops, fetching water from a nearby stream, tending to animals. It was peaceful, but more than that, it felt protected. "These are my faithful ones," Jesus said. I walked through the village, taking it all in. Men were building homes using only hand tools. Women cooked meals over open flames. Children ran freely through the fields, their laughter filling the air. Their lives were simple, Yet there was a deep, undeniable sense of peace. It was something I hadn't felt anywhere else, a security and harmony that the rest of the world seemed to have lost. A man approached me, holding a basket of fruit. He smiled warmly and handed me an apple. "We share everything here," he said. "What we have is enough." I turned to Jesus. "How are they surviving without the mark?" "Because I am providing for them," he answered. I watched as a woman knelt beside a small patch of soil. She closed her eyes in prayer, and as her hands touched the earth, tiny green sprouts pushed their way up through the dirt. The plants were growing faster than they should have. A light rain began to fall, even though the sky was perfectly clear. "I will give them food, water, and shelter," Jesus said. "But more than that, I will give them peace." At the edge of the village, I saw a man standing still, his eyes fixed on the forest. He seemed calm, yet watchful. "They are being hunted," Jesus said. Suddenly, dark figures emerged from the trees, soldiers dressed in black, weapons ready. They moved silently, their steps careful and deliberate. But as soon as they crossed the tree line, something incredible happened. A wall of light appeared in front of them. The soldiers halted, confused. One of them lifted his weapon, but the light grew stronger, forcing them to shield their eyes. "They cannot see them," Jesus said. "My hand protects them." Then I noticed them, angels walking among the villagers. They were tall, radiant, their swords of light strapped to their sides. They stood at the edges of the village, their expressions calm, but their eyes sharp, always watching. "As in the days of Elijah, I will provide for my people," Jesus continued. "Manna from heaven, water from the rock. Nothing will harm them." I saw the villagers gathered in the center of the village, lifting their hands in worship. Their voices rose in praise, filling the air, echoing across the hills. The presence of God was tangible, like the very air itself was alive with peace. "The world will call them outcasts," Jesus said, "but they are my children. They will never be without." Nearby, a young girl knelt by a stream, dipping her hands into the cool water. A bright fish swam toward her fingers, and she laughed. An older woman sat close by, weaving a basket. The moment was simple, yet overflowing with peace and joy. Then Jesus' tone grew serious. "Not everyone will find this refuge," he said. "Only those who trust me completely." I turned and saw a man standing at the edge of the village. He hesitated, uncertain. There was no mark on him, but I could see the fear in his eyes. "He must choose," Jesus said. "Trust in me, or trust in the world." The man took a cautious step forward. A villager reached out a hand. Slowly, he grasped it and stepped into the village. The fear in his face melted away, replaced by peace. Jesus watched, then spoke again. "There is still time," he said, "but not much." Then he turned to me. His eyes were serious, yet full of love. Placing his hands on my shoulders, he spoke with urgency. "Henry, you must tell them." "Tell them what?" I asked. Jesus lifted his hand, and suddenly a vision unfolded in the sky above us. I saw the future unravel before my eyes. Chaos spreading like wildfire, riots, famine, wars, natural disasters, governments collapsing, military forces marching through city streets, people crying out for help, desperate. At the center of it all stood Elon Musk, holding up what seemed like the answer. "They will turn to him for salvation," Jesus said, "but it will be a trap." Then I saw Donald Trump, standing behind a podium, signing a document. Elon Musk stood beside him. Behind them, a massive screen displayed ominous words. Jesus' voice was filled with sorrow. "Even those who know me will be deceived." "How can they resist?" I asked. Jesus' gaze locked onto mine. intense and unwavering. By knowing my voice, he said. By trusting me, even when the world calls them fools. Then he reached out and touched my forehead. In an instant, my vision shifted. I saw the world differently. Not just what was happening, but what was behind it. Dark, shadowy figures whispering in the ears of world leaders. Chains wrapped around the hands and feet of those who had accepted the mark. They will believe they are free, Jesus said, but they will be prisoners. I saw churches closing, Bibles burning, preachers standing before empty congregations, people who once proclaimed their faith, now silent, marked, cut off, unable to feel God's presence. Jesus turned to me one last time. His eyes held urgency, but also hope. Tell them there is hope, he said.